Okay, good afternoon. My name is Matt Dias, and I am running the Inside City Hall series for Via Transportation, where we get to take an inside look at some of the individuals and cities and towns that have done innovative concepts when it comes to public transit. And that really runs the gamut from purchase transit systems to fixed route transit systems, micro transit, and last mile systems. What we typically do is spend 30 minutes with one of our partners. And today I've invited one of our favorite partners and probably one of our longest term partners in Lone Tree, Colorado. I've invited Seth Hoffman, the longtime city manager of Lone Tree. So, Seth, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I thought, we usually kick this series off for other municipal officials, either transportation directors or deputy city managers or planning directors, where if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about yourself. I know you've had a long tenure, but everyone likes a good story. So maybe you could just tell us about your background a little bit, where you're from, maybe where you went to school, and how you ascended to become a city manager.
Sure. I actually grew up knowing a little bit about local government when I was a kid in Kansas, young kid. My dad was the mayor of the town that I grew up in. So I met my first city manager probably when I was 4 or 5 years old. So um, that wasn't the day that I decided to become one for sure, but at least knew what the business was from a young age. So growing up in Kansas, I ended up going to the University of Kansas both for my undergrad degree and for master's in public administration. They have a focused program on local government management. So I've been able to do kind of what I wanted to do right out of graduate school. Left there and went to Western Colorado, Grand Junction, Colorado for a few years and really enjoyed it out there and have been in Lone Tree now for the last 21 years.
Wow, fantastic. And would you mind just telling us a little bit about Lone Tree, the community, the size, the scope, and the location for our listeners?
Yeah, happy to. So Lone Tree is a relatively young but dynamic city in the Denver metro area. We are home to about 15,000 people, which is small population wise, but we have a very large daytime population. So
Hmm.
millions of people come in and out every year. We have the largest regional mall in the Western United States. We have a lot of great employer campuses like Charles Schwab, Kiewit, large medical presence. And so we're really about, moving people in and out of the city every day. And that's probably a little bit of what we're going to talk about today.
Well, so I guess that maybe it's time to get into that. I mean, Lone Tree is a fairly rich transit community, and it's within the environment of having several light rail lines run through it. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have a light rail line that links us between here and downtown Denver and also the rest of the metro area, including airport and all across the metro. We're home to five light rail stations just in
Wow.
our relatively small footprint. So between that and then the interchange of two major highways and a couple other transportation options, we do have a rich transportation environment, and that's by design. We've been working on that for many years.
And so maybe that's a good segue into so a relatively transit-rich community within sort of the ecosystem of the greater Denver metro area. Sort of, so what was happening in Lone Tree that made you think about taking on a micro transit or a last mile program? So what were what was happening or what were the goals of your city council or was occurring that made you think about something like this? I think it's almost 10 years ago now.
Yeah. So what we well, first of all, it started with our strategic plan. We
Hmm.
started our strategic planning exercise in 2013 when I became city manager, and we came up with six big ideas. And one of those is that we'll be a national model for our visionary transportation network.
Oh,
And
wow.
all those words were selected really carefully, right? Obviously visionary, transportation, and network, knowing that the combination of a lot of different things is what is going to make us successful. And so obviously we're going to have people driving cars. We have two major highways. We want to make sure that those flow smoothly. Certainly the light rail is a component. And then what we needed though, when our first two light rail stops were built the rest of the line hadn't finished yet. And so we started actually with a circulator shuttle, almost as a bridge, transit bridge, to get people from the end of the line station to those office campuses that I was talking about, knowing that hopefully someday that the transit would be extended, but we needed a solution in the interim. Once the light rail was extended, then we had the system already in place. We could tell that the circulator wasn't, going to be the future. And so we started thinking about, all right, how can we serve the whole city with this rather than just this fixed route circulator?
Mm.
And that's what led us to more of an on-demand idea.
And so, so the initial stages, did you go it alone or did you have collaborators? And tell me about that a little bit. I think I recall it started as a pilot program. You guys were, I'll say, sort of on the bleeding edge of microtransit and last mile solutions. Clearly, starting with the circulator, which sounds like a small fixed route, but it sounds
Right.
like you guys were already sort of searching and probing for another solution.
Yeah, we were. And in fact, our neighbors just to the north of us in Centennial, they had done a pilot using Lyft, the Lyft platform, a TNC, to um, uh, for a kind of a senior transportation pilot, which they did for a little while.
Hmm.
That got us thinking a little bit more about using that existing TNC platform. So we partnered with Uber for a little while and using their platform and the shuttle buses that we've been using for the circulator kind of as a combo, and it worked. I mean, it kind of proved out the concept. Uber, decided that wasn't going to be something that they wanted to continue with, so that led us to start looking for other partners to help us with the technology piece.
And so tell me, at that time, did you own any of the equipment or infrastructure? Tell me about that in terms of like software and operations, because I know as a former city manager, that's something that I had to contemplate when we introduced microtransit, whether we were going to do it ourselves, whether we were going to operate the system and use someone else's software. So in those initial stages, when you move from circulator to Uber and then Uber to the next sort of step, what were the sort of machinations of that? What were you contemplating?
Well, I mean, we knew that we weren't going to be the ones to design a platform that competes with everything else on the front page of your phone, right? And so we weren't going to be the app
Hmm.
developer, and we didn't want to be. And so we did a kind of a nationwide search and even asked some really large companies that you'd recognize if they would be interested in partnering with us to actually build
Cool.
what we had in mind. And we had some luck with that, but we didn't get as far as we hoped. We eventually found a provider that could help us with um, the technology, but then they didn't have the fleet experience, and so we had to find a separate vendor that helped us, actually owned and ran the fleet of vehicles, and that worked. But it wasn't ideal when you have kind of a technology partner and then a separate operating partner, and there can be some finger pointing, I guess, between the two.
Sure, and I know also as a former city manager, we don't do these things alone. If I recall, you have a really talented team there in Lone Tree and a few individuals in particular that helped you lead this initiative, right?
Yeah, we've had a team over the course of with this 10 years where we um, have had some people that had to be more hands-on during the period where we had the separate the two separate vendors,
Sure.
and then now we have a mobility manager, Dan Rain, who is our point person, and yeah, he's a guru in mobility and thinks about this stuff all the time. So we've been fortunate to be able to attract and retain that kind of talent here.
So, assuming you have that kind of talent and you've had the evolution of different modes, and so what was the biggest risk? I mean, city managers, you're kind of managing risk all the time. There's an old expression, sort of, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. So, how did you prioritize this, and maybe what were the risks that you were thinking of or incurring? I know when you're doing a pilot program, and you're on the bleeding edge of either a new solution, a new technology, a new service, if it doesn't go well, you have to answer to your council and you have to answer to your residents. So what were some of the things that you were contemplating? Were you trying to make it perfect, or were you just trying to throw something against the wall to see if it would stick?
Probably a little more of the second one, but that doesn't sound very strategic. But we knew that this was something, having that headway with the goal of being a national model for our visionary transportation network. I mean, that means that we're going to have to push the envelope, and I think our council and our community knew that and wanted us to do that, and so. But we also, labeled it as a pilot
Mm,
early on, and so that it was clear that hey, this might not be perfect, and if we wait forever, until it is perfect, we'll never launch. And so, we kind of had a launch and learn mentality where we knew we would not have it perfect right off the bat, but that the way it the path to perfect is learning much more quickly, actually operating than just trying to imagine every scenario.
And I know with every pilot program I've ever conducted, I was always taught you sort of have to measure it, and it has to be measurable so you can demonstrate either success or areas to improve the program. Were there things in particular that you thought about, certain terms of key goals or outcomes or key performance indicators when you're running the service that you would have to, or this pilot program, excuse me, you have to report back to your elected officials and let them know like how it was going? What were the things initially that you were contemplating in terms of its performance?
Well, I mean, when we were going into it, the the things we were looking at were things, obviously ridership, how well we did at pairing rides, how many people were downloading the app. There's a
Mhm.
lot of things that you can look at. So those are the things that we had some relatively small goals for all of those. Pretty soon, though, the measure was um, people were asking city council for, saying, hey, I can't get a ride. It's too
Mm.
popular. And like, well, that's a good problem, right? And so
Right.
then it was becoming more of an issue of keeping up with demand rather than proving the use case.
And then I guess my other question is about the region in general. I mean, I know this region is high growth, and your community has been very intentional about its growth. Has it grown? I mean, what's been the evolution? Has it grown into the county? Have there been other jurisdictions that have been interested in it?
Yeah, so we have had quite a bit of interest in this over the years, and I've spoken at conferences. Dan Rain, that we mentioned earlier, has quite a bit just to share our story. And yeah, it has now become what started as a lone tree system has now become more of a regional system. So our partners in Douglas County, the county that
Hmm.
our community is in, has expanded it to a large area called Highlands Ranch to the west of us, and then to a nearby office park as well. And then just today, like 2 hours ago, we did a ribbon cutting to expand it into another neighboring community named Parker, which is to our east. And so, I mean, I think that the amount of the communities have seen the success and also want to invest and also, be able to bring that service and integrate it, which has been really cool. It's not, you know, four different services that all have their own territory. The territories overlap, and so you can really get across the county more than just a first mile, last mile. It really is a regional asset now.
And I also know that your community has, I think it's like 20% of your community is 65 or older.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know what the definition of a senior is anymore because I think I think that's changed over time. But I think there's a high propensity for that population, 65 and older, to use it and then probably gain some independence as well, which is just an additional benefit, more than commuters getting to and from work. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because I heard there were some high points there.
Yeah, so I mean that was one of the things that we didn't exactly expect or plan on. And what we thought was, this was going to be a first last mile, get people light rail, get, or home from work or that kind of thing. But yeah, it definitely became more of a tool for people that might not have another option. In fact, my favorite story is on literally the day that we launched, I asked our team who was the first user. Like I thought that would
Hmm.
be a cool thing to know who was the first one to get a ride. And they told me it was two ladies that lived at a senior center here in senior living facility here in Lone Tree. And I said, well, where did they go? And they said, well, they went to go shoe shopping. And I was like, well, that's cool. That's
Yeah.
what we want it to be. We didn't think about that use case necessarily, but it did kind of make me think, like, when was the last time I had to think about or plan ahead to go buy shoes? And it's been a long time. When I want to go buy shoes, I get in the car and I go. But for these two, that option wasn't available the day before necessarily. And so thinking about the other opportunities that this has unlocked for now tens of thousands of people since we've
Sure.
launched is cool to think about.
Yeah, I think I was looking at some of the stats from your program, and I think you're getting close to almost 80,000 rides a year,
Mhm.
which is an incredible metric, and almost 5 rides per hour. And the majority of them are shared,
Right.
which is just a really great sort of like the DNA of the system. It sounds like it's very high functioning and cost effective. And then the final stat that I'll throw out there was the satisfaction rating. I think these every application these days is a quick way to sort of rate your experience and your interaction with the driver. And I think you're rated a 4.9 out of 5.
Right. And we're a government. So that's really good. Yeah.
That
No, I
that
think
that leads you. That keep going.
no, I was just going to say that those are all, really important things. And I think that we have a really high customer service standard in Lone Tree. We have a kind of our unofficial slogan is that we always pick up the phone. There's always somebody here that actually will listen, will answer the phone when it rings. And so we want to make sure that that is reflected in the service that we provide. You know, wherever we are, whether it's our police officers or it's the drivers that are driving for Link on Demand.
Right, just a little bit of a curveball. So what doesn't go well? I mean, it's a pilot program. Some things can go well. Sometimes it's messy. Not everything's perfect. And you
Mhm.
have the benefit, I think, of looking in the rear view mirror and those that are coming after you, perhaps, or contemplating last mile solutions.
Mhm.
Do you have any advice for the kind of the next city manager or the next town that maybe like yours, high growth community, intentionally planned, very high quality of living, transit rich, some large employers. Do you have any advice for them in terms of, sort of hurdles that they might want to overcome kind of at a gate or things to look out for?
Yeah, I think the the number of people that use this now for to get to medical appointments and people with
Mm.
special needs getting in and out of a vehicle, whether that's in a wheelchair or some other mobility assisting device, that is something that is a different layer of complexity, right? And that's not something that your normal TNC necessarily needs to handle on a daily basis. And so really thinking through and making sure that you have the facilities to and the vehicles to do that right and the drivers trained to do that right, I think is something to make sure that you have your eyes open on the very first go round.
And then in terms of your growth and being intentional, when you're planning, I think I saw a metric the other day. Some of the communities that you're planning, another 30,000 residents and maybe targeting another 50,000 jobs. So land use is a big component of any city manager's duties. Are you planning these? Are you contemplating these developments to continue to have this last mile solution? I mean, are those being built into your planners and your regulators into their calculations when they're forming these new communities for this growth?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the one of the wonderful things about being a growing community is you can really plan ahead for mobility. And so we've been able to build the mobility first, and then the communities around it, whether that's the light rail or a new mobility hub for regional buses or our last mile service that we're talking about now the all of that gets built into the plan on the front end rather than trying to build and then squeeze it in later. We've been really fortunate to be able to have that as part of the plan, and so as we build, definitely thinking about getting people on regional transit or just to local shopping is definitely part of the bigger picture.
Cool. Well, I won't keep you any longer. I want to thank you. I'll make sure I give you the last word. But all in all, just like very, very impressive. I think we talked a little bit about the data coming out of your program with almost 80,000 rides a year and a 4.9 satisfaction rating and a lot of shared rides, 5 rides per hour. So it's one of our more efficient, successful services. And then I think it's really, your story of being so intentional about having these 6 pillars or these 6 goals when you started almost 10 to 15 years ago, and then being willing to try some stuff and knowing that some mistakes might happen, and then seeing the evolution of starting with the circulator, moving into different types of programs with Uber, and then ultimately coming to the turnkey solution where you have a software and an operational vendor that's one in, and they are the same. I think it's a really cool story. And then the fact that you're able to sort of plan your future growth intentionally knowing that this service exists. As a city manager that ran 2 communities that were relatively built out, and one of my communities was in the New England area. The streets are very narrow. They were kind of old horse cart streets. I wish I had that opportunity to plan so intentionally. So I guess I'll leave you with the last word. I know when we've talked in the past, you've said something to me that always stuck with me about like you can't wait for perfection. Maybe you could just sort of like do that for our listeners because it definitely hit home with me.
Yeah, so I just think that I would encourage, it's a great opportunity to innovate. And one of the beautiful things about, working in local government is that, we share our successes and can share what went wrong. And so that doesn't happen necessarily in the corporate world when I worked there, that you can't just call your, a competitor and say, "Hi, how is this going?" But for, cities and towns, that is definitely an opportunity that you have. So yeah, and we would definitely be willing to answer any questions that anyone has about our experience and what we've done, and even some of the things that we would do differently in the future.
Great. Well, thanks, Seth. I really appreciate it. Today we had Seth Hoffman, the city manager, longtime city manager from Lone Tree, Colorado. Keep up the great work. We're very proud of Via's very proud of their services there, and you've been a wonderful partner for us. Thanks so much.
Thank you.